Welcome back to the English Hour. I'm your host, Sophia, and today we're in for an amazing episode. I've got Jacob with me, and we're going to dive into some really fascinating topics that will definitely keep you hooked. How are you doing today, Jacob?
I'm doing great, Sophia. I'm super excited for today's conversation. It's going to be fun, and I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of it.
Absolutely. So, today we're going to talk about something that a lot of people struggle with: staying consistent while learning English. It's a topic that comes up often in our conversations, and I think it's something everyone can relate to. Wouldn't you agree?
For sure. Consistency is key, but it's also one of the hardest things to maintain. There are days when you just don't feel like it, or life gets in the way. But pushing through those moments is what makes the biggest difference in the long run.
Exactly. So, Jacob, how do you stay consistent with your learning? I know you've been on your own language learning journey for a while now. What's your secret?
Well, I've learned that the key is to create a routine that feels natural and not forced. At first, I made the mistake of setting too many big goals that weren't realistic, and that left me feeling overwhelmed. Now, I focus on small, daily tasks. It's all about integrating English into my daily life in a way that doesn't feel like a chore.
That's such an important point. It's so easy to think that you need to dedicate hours at a time to studying, but sometimes it's just about consistency in small doses. What kind of small tasks do you do on a daily basis?
One of the things I do is listen to podcasts or audiobooks in English. It's an easy way to get exposure to the language, and I can do it while I'm doing other things like walking or cooking. I also write down new words or phrases I come across, and then I review them at the end of the week. It's a small but effective way to keep building my vocabulary.
I love that idea. It's such a productive use of time. I've heard a lot of learners say they feel like they're not improving if they're not studying intensely every day. But the truth is, just by exposing yourself to the language regularly, you're improving without even realizing it.
Exactly. It's the little things that add up over time. Another thing that helps me is setting very specific goals, but making sure they're realistic. For example, instead of saying, I want to be fluent in 6 months, I'll set goals like, I want to learn 50 new words by the end of the month. This way I can track my progress and feel a sense of accomplishment.
That's a fantastic approach. Breaking down big goals into smaller, manageable tasks is a great way to avoid burnout. What about when you hit a slump? Everyone goes through those moments where it feels like you're not making any progress.
Definitely. I think everyone hits those slumps. When that happens, I take a step back and focus on something fun, maybe watching a movie or playing a game in English. It's important to remember that language learning doesn't always have to be about textbooks or formal study. Sometimes, just enjoying the language in a fun context can reignite your motivation.
I completely agree. If you treat language learning like a fun challenge rather than a boring task, it can feel a lot more exciting. What do you think about practicing with others? Does that help you stay motivated?
Practicing with others is huge. I've joined language exchange groups and online communities where I can chat with people in English. It really helps because you're not just practicing for the sake of learning, you're actually engaging in meaningful conversations. Plus, you get to learn from others, which is so valuable.
That's a great tip. I think sometimes learners forget that language is all about communication, not just grammar and vocabulary. When you're able to have a real conversation, it feels more rewarding.
Absolutely. And it's okay to make mistakes along the way. The fear of making mistakes often holds people back, but it's part of the process. If you don't make mistakes, you're not pushing yourself enough.
That's such an important point. Making mistakes is how we learn, especially with language. What would you say to someone who's afraid to speak because they think they'll mess up?
I'd say, go for it. Start small, maybe with a few sentences or phrases, and build your confidence from there. It's really about overcoming that initial fear. The more you practice, the easier it gets. Everyone starts somewhere, and no one speaks perfectly right away.
Exactly. And even if you make mistakes, it shows that you're trying and improving. Another thing I've noticed is that when people stop learning a language for a while, they get discouraged when they come back because they feel like they've forgotten everything. Have you experienced that?
Oh, definitely. There have been times when I took breaks from learning English, and when I came back, I felt like I had forgotten so much. But I always remind myself that it's normal. The important thing is to just pick up where you left off. It's like riding a bike. Once you get back into it, things start coming back.
That's such a good analogy. It's like your brain is storing all that information, even when you're not actively studying. So, whenever you're ready to come back, it's just about brushing off the rust.
Exactly. And sometimes when you feel like you've forgotten a lot, just practicing a little bit every day can quickly bring back your confidence. Even if it's just a short conversation or reviewing a few words, it all helps.
Right. It's all about consistency. So, Jacob, do you have any final tips for staying motivated and consistent for our listeners?
My main tip would be to find something that excites you about the language. Whether it's a hobby, a show, a game, or anything else, make it part of your language learning journey. If you enjoy what you're doing, staying consistent won't feel like a burden, it'll just be part of your routine.
I love that. When learning feels like a fun adventure rather than a task, it becomes so much easier to stay motivated. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today, Jacob. It's been such a great conversation.
Thank you, Sophia. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope our listeners find some useful tips to help them stay motivated and consistent in their learning journeys.
I'm sure they will. And to all of our listeners, remember that language learning is a journey. There will be ups and downs. But as long as you keep going, you're making progress. Keep practicing, stay consistent, and we'll see you in the next episode of the English Hour. So, Jacob, before we wrap up, I want to ask you one more thing. Many learners often feel like they're not improving because they don't see immediate results. How do you measure your progress, especially when it feels slow?
That's such a great question, Sophia. I think measuring progress can be tricky because, like you said, improvement sometimes feels invisible. But for me, I like to track my progress in different ways. For example, I compare where I am today to where I was a month or two ago. Even small improvements, like understanding a movie without subtitles or reading a news article with fewer unknown words, are huge wins.
I love that. It's all about noticing those small victories. Sometimes, learners are so focused on the end goal, like fluency, that they forget to celebrate the smaller steps along the way.
Exactly. And another thing I do is record myself speaking in English. I listen to those recordings after a few weeks or months, and it's amazing to hear how much I've improved in terms of pronunciation and fluency. That's a really motivating way to see progress.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. It's kind of like looking back at old photos and realizing how much you've changed. The progress is much clearer when you compare where you were before and where you are now.
Totally. And sometimes it's not just about language skills, it's also about building confidence. When I first started speaking in English, I was hesitant and nervous. Now, I feel more comfortable and confident. That's progress too.
I love that. Confidence in speaking is so key. It's easy to forget that when you're learning a language, you're not just learning words, you're also learning to communicate in a completely new way. Do you have any advice for learners who struggle with speaking confidence?
My advice would be to start speaking in low-pressure environments. Maybe try practicing with a friend or even recording yourself at first. Gradually, you can work your way up to more challenging situations. And the more you do it, the more comfortable it becomes.
That's such a good point. It's all about easing yourself in and making the process feel less intimidating. Another tip I'd add is to focus less on perfection and more on getting your message across. That's really the goal of language learning, to communicate, not necessarily to speak perfectly.
I couldn't agree more. Perfectionism can be a huge barrier. It's better to make mistakes and learn from them than to not speak at all because you're worried about being perfect.
Absolutely. It's a journey, and everyone has their own pace. The most important thing is to keep moving forward. And speaking of moving forward, we've covered so many great tips today. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
One last thing I'll say is that language learning isn't a race. Some people might learn faster, and others might take their time. But what matters is that you're learning in a way that works for you. Don't compare yourself to others, just focus on your own progress and enjoy the journey.
I love that. It's all about enjoying the process and being kind to yourself. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that's a perfect note to end on for today. Thank you so much for sharing all these amazing tips, Jacob. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Sophia. I've had a great time, and I hope everyone listening feels inspired to stay consistent and keep learning.
I'm sure they do. And to our listeners, remember that language learning is a personal journey. Stay patient, keep practicing, and most importantly, enjoy the process. We'll see you in the next episode of the English Hour. Before we go, Jacob, do you have any favorite resources or tools that have really helped you in your language learning journey?
Oh, absolutely. One of my go-to tools is language exchange apps. They're great for practicing with native speakers. It's a wonderful way to get real-world practice, especially with speaking and listening. You get to have conversations in a relaxed environment, and it really helps build confidence.
That's such a good point. Language exchange apps are perfect for practicing conversational skills, which can often be the hardest part of learning a new language. Are there any specific apps you recommend?
Yeah, I've been using apps like HelloTalk and Tandem for a while. Now they have great features like text, voice messages, and even video calls, which make it feel like a real conversation. I also love how you can correct each other's messages, so it's a great way to learn from your mistakes.
That sounds amazing. And I love that you get the chance to teach others as well. It's a great way to reinforce your own knowledge. Now, let's talk about motivation. Language learning can get tough sometimes, especially when things feel like they're not moving fast enough. How do you stay motivated?
For me, staying motivated comes down to setting clear goals. For instance, I'll set a goal like, I want to watch a movie in English without subtitles, or I want to hold a 10-minute conversation in English with a native speaker. Once I hit those goals, I set new ones. It keeps me focused and gives me something to look forward to.
Setting clear, measurable goals is such a smart strategy. It makes the whole learning process feel more tangible. And I imagine it's incredibly rewarding when you achieve those goals.
Exactly. The satisfaction you get from reaching a milestone, no matter how small, really keeps you going. It's like a little victory every time.
And let's not forget about the power of celebrating your successes, no matter how big or small. Whether it's learning a new phrase or understanding a song in English, every win counts. Do you have any tips for staying consistent with language practice, even when life gets busy?
Consistency is key, but I totally get that it can be hard to find time, especially when you're juggling other responsibilities. One thing that helps me is creating a daily routine. Even if I only have 10 minutes, I'll make sure I practice, whether it's reading an article, listening to a podcast, or doing a language exercise.
That's a really good approach. Even 10 minutes a day can add up over time. It's all about making language practice a habit, right?
Absolutely. And it doesn't always have to be a structured study session. Sometimes, I'll just watch an English show or listen to a podcast while cooking or commuting. It's a way to expose myself to the language without feeling like I have to dedicate hours to it.
That's such a great tip. Language learning doesn't always have to feel like a formal study session. It's about finding ways to immerse yourself in the language throughout the day.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how much you can learn just by being consistent with small actions over time.
It really adds up. All right, Jacob, one last question before we wrap up for real this time. If you could give one piece of advice to someone just starting their language learning journey, what would it be?
My advice would be to embrace the journey and don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all part of the process, and it's through making mistakes that you learn the most. Just keep practicing, and remember it's okay to take your time.
That's wonderful advice, Jacob. Learning a language isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I know our listeners are going to find your tips incredibly helpful.
Thank you for having me, Sophia. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. Remember, language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. So enjoy the process and keep practicing. We'll see you in the next episode of the English Hour. I love how you said that. Jacob, language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. That's such a refreshing mindset. Now, when you're not learning languages, what other hobbies or activities do you enjoy? I think it's important to have a balance.
Absolutely, I'm really into photography, actually. It's a great way for me to relax and tap into my creative side. I find that it complements language learning in a way both are forms of self-expression, whether through pictures or words.
That's such a cool connection. Photography and language are both about capturing moments. Do you find that learning a language enhances your understanding of the world around you? Like when you're out taking photos.
Definitely. Learning a language gives you a whole new perspective. For instance, I've been learning Spanish, and it's amazing how much more I can appreciate certain parts of culture, like music and art, because I can understand the lyrics or the story behind the art. It makes everything feel more meaningful.
That's so true. Language has a way of opening up new worlds to us, making every experience richer. Do you think your photography has improved in any way because of your language learning?
It definitely has. When I travel, knowing the local language allows me to connect with people more authentically. Whether I'm photographing street scenes or landscapes, being able to communicate with locals gives me access to stories, emotions, and moments I might have missed otherwise.
That's a great point. It's like you're capturing the essence of a place and its people, not just their physical appearance. Do you have any tips for those who are interested in learning a language through something they love, like photography or music?
I think the key is to make learning fun and immersive. For instance, if you're into music, try listening to songs in the language you're learning. Find lyrics online and translate them. It'll help you pick up new words and phrases naturally. And for photography, take photos of signs or objects with their names in the language you're learning. Label things in your home with their translations.
Those are fantastic tips. I think it's about blending learning with passion, right? Whether it's capturing the world through a lens or singing along to your favorite songs, it helps the learning process feel more enjoyable.
Exactly. You don't have to make language learning feel like a chore. If you're already doing something you love, it's just a matter of adding language practice into it.
Yes, and when you do that, you create a more natural environment for learning. I know you mentioned music. What kind of music do you like to listen to while learning? Do you have any go-to artists or songs?
Oh, absolutely. I love listening to Spanish music artists like Joynes, Shakira, and Rosalia. Their music is catchy, and the lyrics are often a mix of easy to understand and more complex phrases, which makes them great for learners. Plus, it gives me a chance to understand how people express emotions in the language, which is a huge part of becoming fluent.
That's such a good strategy. Music is an amazing way to get a feel for the rhythm and flow of a language. Do you find that you start picking up words or phrases from songs without even realizing it?
All the time, I'll hear a word or phrase in a song, and it'll stick with me. And then when I come across it again in a conversation or article, I feel like, hey, I know that. It's that reinforcement that makes the language stick.
It's like your brain is connecting the dots in the background, even if you're not consciously studying. That's why I think it's so important to keep exposing ourselves to the language in different ways.
Exactly. And even when I'm just chilling, I'll listen to music in the language or watch TV shows or movies without subtitles. It helps me tune my ear to the natural flow of the language.
I totally agree. Watching content without subtitles is one of the most effective ways to improve listening skills. It can be challenging at first, but it really helps your brain adapt. Do you ever watch shows or movies in the language you're learning?
Yes, I watch a lot of Spanish TV shows, especially dramas. They're really good for learning everyday vocabulary and slang, which you might not always get in a textbook. One of my favorites is La Casa de Papel's Money Heist. Actually, the characters use such a wide range of expressions, it's perfect for learning colloquial Spanish.
Oh, I love that show too. It's so thrilling and fast-paced, and you're right, the language is so much more authentic. Watching shows like that really helps with picking up conversational language.
Exactly. Plus, there's a lot of repetition in TV shows, so it's easy to hear the same phrases or words over and over. That repetition really drives the language home.
Yes, repetition is one of the best ways to internalize new words. It's almost like the language gets ingrained in your mind, right? Now, Jacob, do you have any tips on improving speaking skills specifically? I know it can be one of the toughest parts of language learning.
For speaking, my biggest tip is to not be afraid to make mistakes. The more you speak, the more confident you'll get. And I know it sounds cliché, but it's true, practice really does make perfect. I started by speaking with myself, just having simple conversations in the mirror or recording myself speaking about my day. It helped me feel more comfortable.
Speaking with yourself, that's such a great idea. It helps with fluency and pronunciation. It also gives you a chance to reflect on what you want to say before you say it, which can help reduce anxiety when you speak to others.
Exactly, it's like a safe space to practice. And over time, you'll feel less nervous speaking to others because you've already practiced your thoughts aloud. Also, don't worry if you don't get everything perfect. Native speakers appreciate the effort.
That's such great advice, Jacob. I think a lot of learners worry about sounding perfect, but language learning is all about communication. As long as you're making yourself understood, that's the goal.
100% it's about connecting with people. The more you practice, the better you'll get, and soon you won't even think about making mistakes. You'll just focus on having a real conversation.
That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To feel comfortable speaking, and to use the language as a tool to communicate with others. Thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing tips, Jacob. I think our listeners are going to find them really helpful and inspiring.
It's been a pleasure, Sophia. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone who's been tuning in today. Remember, language learning is a process, and it's all about enjoying the journey. Keep practicing. And we'll see you next time on the English Hour. Before we wrap up, Jacob, I wanted to ask you about something a lot of people struggle with: staying motivated. Learning a language is a long-term commitment, and sometimes it's easy to lose steam. How do you stay motivated throughout your learning process?
Great question, Sophia. For me, it's all about setting small, achievable goals. Like, instead of focusing on fluency as an end goal, I set milestones like learning a set number of new words each week or being able to have a short conversation with a native speaker. These little wins keep me going. And I also remind myself of why I started language learning is my passport to experiencing new cultures.
I love that approach. Breaking it down into smaller chunks makes the journey feel more manageable. I've also noticed that people who are passionate about travel seem to stay motivated longer. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, travel is such a great motivator. When you know you're going to be in a country where the language is spoken, you get this extra push to prepare. I remember when I traveled to Spain, my Spanish improved so much in just a few days because I had to use it constantly.
That's a perfect example of immersion. Right? You don't have a choice but to use the language when you're surrounded by it. I think that kind of experience is invaluable.
Exactly. Immersion is the best way to accelerate language learning. You can read books, watch shows, or take classes, but there's nothing like being in a place where you can practice every day. The conversations with locals, the new words you pick up, it's all part of the experience.
You're absolutely right. Immersion forces you to learn quickly, and there's no better way to truly live the language. Speaking of living the language, how do you integrate Spanish into your daily routine, even when you're not traveling?
Well, I try to keep it part of my life in small ways. I label things in my house with their Spanish names, listen to podcasts while I'm commuting, and I follow Spanish speaking influencers on social media. It's about keeping the language around you, so it's constantly in your mind.
Those are great strategies. It's like you're creating a mini immersion environment without actually leaving your home. How important do you think it is to surround yourself with the language, even when you're not actively studying?
It's essential. I think a lot of learners get caught up in the I have to study for X amount of hours a day mindset, but language learning isn't just about time spent, it's about how much you're exposed to it. The more you hear it, the more natural it becomes. Even if you're just listening to music or watching TV, you're still absorbing the language.
That's such an important point. You don't have to sit down with textbooks all the time. Sometimes, just casually listening or reading can make a big difference. Do you have any favorite language learning resources that you found particularly helpful?
One of my favorite apps is Duolingo, especially when I'm on the go. It's really great for building vocabulary and practicing grammar in short bursts. I also like using Memrise for learning phrases that are useful in real world conversations. And of course, YouTube is a goldmine for language learners. There are so many amazing channels that focus on different aspects of language learning.
Those are great choices. I've heard a lot of people praise Duolingo for its engaging, bite-sized lessons. And Memrise's approach to real-world phrases is awesome. Have you tried any language exchange platforms, like Tandem or HelloTalk?
Yes, I've used both, and I absolutely love them. They give you the opportunity to chat with native speakers, which is amazing for building confidence. It's like a virtual language exchange. You can practice speaking, writing, or even video chat, and it's super easy to use.
That sounds so useful. It's always great to get first-hand experience from native speakers. I think people sometimes underestimate how much they can learn just from casual conversations with others. Have you had any memorable moments in a language exchange?
Oh, definitely. One time, I was talking to someone in Spanish about a trip I took to Mexico, and they corrected me on some small but important details, like how to pronounce certain words. It was a little embarrassing at first, but I really appreciated it because it made me sound more natural. It also helped me realize how much more there is to learn.
That's such a great experience. I think making those mistakes and learning from them is such an important part of the process. It shows you're pushing yourself and you're actually improving. Have you ever had a moment where you realized, wow, I'm actually fluent now? Or when you understood something you couldn't before?
I remember one time I was watching a Spanish TV show without subtitles, and I understood almost everything. It was such a surreal feeling. I realized that I was thinking in Spanish instead of translating everything in my head. That was the moment I knew I was making real progress.
That must have felt amazing. It's like everything clicked into place. That's what keeps us going, isn't it? Those little moments of progress are so rewarding.
Exactly, and that's why I think it's so important to celebrate those small victories. They help you keep going, especially on the tough days when you feel like you're not progressing as quickly as you'd like.
I love that mindset. Every small step counts, and each one is part of the bigger journey. So, as we wrap up, Jacob, do you have any final tips for our listeners who might be feeling overwhelmed with language learning or thinking about giving up?
I would say don't give up. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. You're not going to get fluent overnight, and that's okay. Celebrate the small victories, stay consistent, and remember that every mistake is a lesson. And most importantly, enjoy the process. It's all about the journey, not just the destination.
Such great advice, Jacob. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your insights. I'm sure our listeners are feeling inspired and ready to tackle their own language learning journeys.
It was my pleasure, Sophia. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of the English Hour. Keep learning, stay motivated, And remember, it's all about enjoying the process. See you next time. Before we wrap up completely, Jacob, I think one last thing I'd love to hear from you is what's the most surprising thing you've discovered about language learning that you didn't expect?
Oh, that's a good one. I think the most surprising thing for me was how much my mindset shifted. At first, I was all about getting it right, focusing on perfect grammar and pronunciation. But then, I realized language learning is more about communication than perfection. The more I focused on actually talking, even with mistakes, the better I became. It's really about using the language as a tool, not a test.
That's such a huge revelation. It's like letting go of that fear of making mistakes and just enjoying the conversation. That's definitely a key to progress.
Exactly. Once I let go of that pressure, I started enjoying it so much more. And the more fun I had with it, the better my skills grew. It's amazing how much of an impact mindset has on learning a new language.
That's a powerful takeaway. It really ties back to something we talked about earlier, celebrating the small wins. It's not about getting everything right, but about continuing to practice and improve little by little. So, now that you've learned so much about language learning, do you think you'll pick up any other languages?
I definitely want to. I'm currently thinking about tackling French next. After Spanish, it feels like it might be easier to dive into since there are a lot of similarities between the two. I also really love the culture and the sound of the language. Plus, knowing French will open up even more travel opportunities.
That's exciting. French is such a beautiful language, and it's a great one to learn after Spanish, since there are so many shared words and grammar rules. I'm sure you'll do amazing with it. And maybe you can even start a French podcast to document your learning journey.
Huh, that's actually a fun idea. I might just take you up on that. Maybe one day you'll have me back on the English Hour as a French learner.
I'd love that. You know, it's always inspiring to see someone take on the challenge of learning a new language. And it's a journey that never really ends. We learn and grow as people through language. And I think that's something beautiful to remember.
Couldn't agree more. It's not just about acquiring a new skill, it's about connecting with the world and becoming a part of a larger community. Language learning gives you access to so many different experiences.
Absolutely. Whether it's meeting new people, understanding different cultures, or just enjoying a new perspective on the world, it's all part of the adventure.
Exactly, and that's why I encourage anyone who's thinking about learning a language to just start. You don't need to wait for the perfect time or for everything to be just right. You just need to dive in, and the journey will take care of itself.
Well said, Jacob. Starting is the hardest part, but once you get the ball rolling, it becomes so much easier. And remember, as we said earlier, mistakes are part of the fun. So, for anyone listening, don't be afraid to make those mistakes. It's all part of the learning process.
That's right, don't let fear hold you back. Every conversation, every word learned, it's progress. And I think we all get better by simply showing up and trying.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on for today's episode. Jacob, thank you once again for joining me and sharing your experience with language learning.
Thank you for having me, Sophia. It was a blast chatting with you, and I hope some of what we discussed today will inspire others to dive into their own language learning journeys.
I'm sure it will. And to our listeners, remember, whether you're just starting or you've been learning for a while, every step forward counts. Keep going, and don't forget to enjoy the process. Until next time, happy learning.
Thanks again, Sophia. Looking forward to hearing from everyone, and good luck with all your language adventures.
Take care, Jacob. And to everyone tuning in, see you next time on the English Hour. Keep learning and keep exploring.